Welcome, friends. Today we are talking to Brittany Hodak, who is the author of Creating Superfans, How to Turn Your Customers into Lifelong Advocates. You can see the book here. So Brittany, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Kathryn. I'm so excited to be here and talk to you. I am someone who accidentally became incredibly passionate about customer experience. This was something that I never dreamed I would be writing about, talking about. I always wanted to work in the entertainment industry. And growing up, that was my dream, was to work at a record label or maybe a music magazine. And when I was 16, I got my first job working at a radio station. And over the next decade, was fortunate enough to get to work at all those places, music magazines and record labels and entertainment agencies. And I was so passionate about helping artists grow their fan bases, go from being, a brand new artist to somebody selling out arenas and stadiums. And along the way, as I started to work with consumer packaged goods brands and really brands of all sizes and all ages, from startups to companies that have been around for over a century in some cases, I realized that all of the same marketing problems and branding problems and sales problems that I was trying to help these artists solve, all of these brand managers and all of these entrepreneurs and all of these marketers were also trying to solve for their companies. And so I went back to school. I got a master's degree in marketing and consumer behavior and really started to try to figure out, well, is everybody trying to solve the same problem? Are we all trying to figure out how to get people to pay more attention and to be more loyal and to advocate on behalf of the things that we want them to care more about? And it was kind of one of those things where once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And then I felt like I've just got to solve the problem. I've got to figure it out. I've got to figure out what it is that makes some people incredibly loyal to the things to which they're loyal, and then vocal about supporting those things, spreading the word, telling their friends they need to pay attention. And I thought, if I could just figure out a formula that was simple to replicate, that could be proven to be effective, and then teach it to everybody, it would help so many people, not just the businesses, but the customers as well. Because obviously, when businesses are thinking more about customer centricity and customer experience, the customers really benefit, the most, like more so than anybody else. The customers are the ones who benefit.
That is so true. And it was surprising to me. I'm going to say this. Before reading the book, it was like, sure, customer experience, that's a big deal. After reading the book, I'm like, this is a real differentiator. This is a big deal. And I loved the examples and the stories you shared because they really highlighted what a difference they can make. But I'm really fascinated by your background working in the music business industry, working on fans, because that's really what this is all about, isn't it?
It really is. And I remember both as a kid who just really loved music, who would, read reviews of new artists in magazines or listen to debut singles. And then later, when I was working at labels, everybody was trying to figure out, what's the X factor? What's the secret sauce? What's the magic thing that's going to make this band break and all of these other artists break up? Like, why are some bands going to go viral and others are going to go away? And the thing that I kept finding again and again and again was the bands who had the strongest connection to their fans were the ones who made it in the end, because those were the ones who, every time they came back to a market, they were going to be playing to a bigger crowd, because all the people who saw them last time were going to come back. They were going to bring friends with them. They were going to sell more merch. They were going to sell more albums, all of the things. And I remember, the world is so different. I mean, everything is so different than it was 25 years ago, before social media was a thing, but especially the music industry. Like, there used to be this belief that you had to have this separation, that the artists were like these untouchable gods, and they wouldn't give interviews and they wouldn't sign autographs and they wouldn't talk to fans, and there was no interaction, right? And it was the exception when you had an artist that wanted to meet their fans, that wanted to shake their hands, that wanted to sign their merch after the shows, and wanted to be involved in the marketing, right? Like, there were so many artists for so long who were like, I'm going to make the album, record it, and then I want nothing to do with it. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to promote it. That's the label's job. And they would ultimately go away. And I think it's because there was this disconnect. You have these fans who are like, I want more. And these artists who are like, sorry, that's all you get. And then no wonder their careers would not flourish, right? So, but I think it sort of illustrates now how different that is. Like it is almost impossible for an artist to say, I don't want to talk, I want to be disconnected in a world of social media. But the rules for branding and the way that brands have to engage with their customers has completely flipped and changed too. So that paradigm is now much more of that same two-way street of it's not just about we're going to make it and sell it to you and you're lucky you get to buy it, but you get to help us co-create these things that we're going to offer, and you get to help us make them better so that we can better serve you. And if we don't, you're going to go to somebody else who can, because we're living
Yes.
in a world where it is so easy for so many things to be replicated and reproduced much faster than it ever would have been possible even like 5 years ago.
So true. It was, I guess, back in 2010, I'm going to age myself here. A lot of the messaging that I was creating at that time was companies no longer talk to the customer. We talk with. It's a conversation. And I think what you're doing is taking that concept to the next level, where you're not just engaging in a conversation. As you said, you're co-creating. You're letting them actually be involved with your brand.
Yeah, and it's so important because if you think about how media travels and proliferates today, you don't get to say what your brand is anymore.
That
You
is
get to
true.
put a suggestion out there into the world, but it's your customers who tell their friends and sometimes strangers what your brand is. And what are we going to believe? Are we going to believe one company saying, here's what I am? Or are we going to believe dozens, hundreds, thousands, millions of customers saying, well, here's what they really are, whether good, bad, or ugly. So that's just the reality now, is your brand isn't what you say it is. Your brand is that echo back of what your customers are saying. And hopefully they're saying something at all, right? Like the worst case scenario is sort of just quiet, like nobody's saying anything about your brand. That's one of the problems that I talk about in the book, this apathy problem of brands who have not made a compelling enough case as to why anyone should care or share about their brand at all.
And unfortunately, I think that's where most companies live, because I've been very involved in content creation for the majority of my career. And I'm trying to actually take that to the next level as well, because content itself is what you're saying. We're just putting messaging out there. We're not really engaging. And I believe that engagement is what's missing. We've got to find a way to create that conversation, to get it going back and forth. And that's a different way of thinking about business. And everyone's thinking, if I just create more interesting content, they'll engage. No, I think there's your super system is actually the solution. Tell us what super means.
Yeah, well, super is an acronym. And really, the idea is that if you want to create super fans, being good enough is not good enough. You've got to be super. And super is a framework that I developed over many years of researching, studying, practicing customer experience, trying to figure out a way to say, how can I help any company at any point in their journey create more super fans? Like, what does that look like? What does that mean? So super is where I landed. And the sort of operating principle on the behind all of this is this idea that super fans, which quickly is a super fan is somebody who is so delighted by your product or service that they become an enthusiastic advocate, meaning they're telling other people. So in other words, it's a customer who creates more customers. And I believe that super fan customers are created at the intersection of your story and every customer story, meaning that you're making your offering, whatever that is, whether it's a product, a service, experience, almost always it's a combination of those, because people don't buy just products or services. They buy the experiences that they're wrapped within. So you're making your thing relevant to the life and the needs and the wants of that customer. Because when you can do that, when you can connect your story to theirs, you go from being seen as simply a solution, simply a commodity provider, to really this category of one. All of a sudden, it's like when you find Waldo in the big page of all the guys in the striped shirts and hats, right? And you're like, there, that one, Waldo. That's what happens when you connect your story to your customer story. So that's kind of the purpose behind this system. And as you mentioned, I call it the supermodel, and it's 5 pillars, each one that begins with one of the letters in super. So first step is S, and S stands for start with your story. And the idea behind start with your story is not lead with your story, but what is it about you that is so unique and different that you deserve superfans? What are you doing for your customers that nobody else is? Why do you deserve those superfan customers? And I say start with that because if you don't figure this out, nothing else matters that much. Like if you don't have this nailed, you are pretty much by definition a commodity provider, and you're going to win a lot of the toss-ups. You're going to lose a lot of the toss-ups. Some people are going to pick you because you're the cheapest, or you're the fastest, or you're the closest to their house, or whatever. And if you do a pretty good job, you're going to retain a good amount of them until someone else comes along who's a little bit cheaper, or a little bit faster, or a little bit more convenient, or closer to their house, or whatever. So when I say you have to do this, do you have to do this to run a business that does okay? No, but if you want to create a sustainable, lasting brand that is differentiated from your competitors in a way to where you can begin to make things like price irrelevant, where you can make your customers never even think about rate shopping you or looking for somebody else who can do it, then you absolutely have to start with your story.
That is so incredible. And I loved the way you taught story in the book because, in my brain, and I don't know why, being a writer in the past, it's like, oh, there's one story. But you make a clear point that no, there's not just one story that has to somehow or other cover everything you do. You can have a lot of little stories that just make you relevant in that moment.
Well, I heard somewhere, and I need to look up the origin of this quote because I don't know where it came from. I heard somebody say it on a podcast, and I thought, wow, that's so true. They said, facts tell, stories sell. Oftentimes, I think we can make the mistake of trying to be so factual, so literal, so much of like, let me explain to you how this works, that we lose the people for the details, right? And it's like you miss the forest for the trees. Like we are designed and engineered as people to connect with stories for millennia longer, right? Like since the beginning of time, that's how we've passed down information. That's how we've shared important truths about who we are and who we want to be. Stories are so incredibly powerful. So in the book, I talk about the need for an origin story, talking about how you got to where you're at, what in your past led you to this moment where you're at, kind of like a superhero. I talk about impact stories, the stories that are going to help break through for specific audiences. But I also talk about this idea of having a story set list. So just like when a band is going to go play a show at a bar, or a small venue where it's not, the Eras tour, it's not choreographed, there's not pyro, there's not, all the things that have to sync up with the lights and the video and the music. A lot of times we're going to read the room. We're going to figure out what the mood is, what the vibe is, what's the next right song to play. So they have a set list that they can look at and say, we're going to play this song, or we're going to do this. Or if somebody requests a song, we know we've got this one. Your story set list can be the same way, where you think about the most impactful stories that you have to share, either about a difference that you made in someone's life, or something that happened to you that changed the way you thought about something, or an experience that you had that radically changed the direction of your life and made you say, I've got to go do this other thing now. I hear a lot of times people are like, I never thought I would get into this industry that I'm in, but I went to go sell my home and buy another one, and it was the worst experience I've ever had. And I thought I can do better. Or I had an experience with, something with my health, and that made me become a nurse because I had just this horrible experience. Or now I'm doing, XYZ, whatever it is. All of those stories, if you don't have them collected anywhere, there's a really good chance that sometimes when you have the opportunity to deploy one that would be really impactful with either a prospective or a current customer, you're not thinking of it because you've got 19,000 other things in your head. So if you collect those, so you start to know these are some of the things that have been really meaningful and impactful for my customers or my vendors or my partners or whatever it is in the past, you've got an easy to reference place to go use those again and again, because it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about how do we share the thing that has the potential to make the most impact in the most efficient and effective way.
So how do you recommend we actually create that library of stories?
It's a
Where,
great question.
yes.
I have a framework that I share in the book where I take you through some of the questions that you can ask yourselves about things that happened to you that were memorable, that were impactful, maybe the first that happened to you, maybe the biggest things that happened to you. And then an idea that I share in the book that I think is really important to grasp. I live just south of Nashville, Tennessee, and one of the things that we're known for, other than bachelorette parties, um, is country music songwriters. We have some of the most talented songwriters in the world. People come from all over the world to write here, to record here. And one of the mistakes that a lot of new songwriters make when they move to town is they think when they're writing songs, they've got to make them very general. They've got to have details that are sort of wide enough for anyone to fit within. But what happens because of that, when they end up singing songs about like, the guy was so cute, the party was so fun, nobody connects with it because they don't feel it. They don't see themselves in it. But when we hear a song and we hear the details about exactly what he or she looked like, exactly what it felt like, we can picture it in our minds. And the really cool thing that our brain does is when I hear a song that somebody is singing about their hometown, my brain thinks about my hometown. When somebody's talking to me about their children, I'm thinking about my children. And our brain fills in the dots and we begin to think this person is like me. Even if the details are different, even if the adjectives don't match, even if they're singing about something that doesn't quite match the biographical details of our memory, it matches the emotional details of our memory. So, in the stories that we collect, in the stories that we tell, it's about not skipping past the things that point to how it felt, what it was like, why it mattered, because
Make it
those are the things that really
emotional.
resonate. Exactly, the emotional parts.
Okay. And do you create a file folder in Google where you collect these stories? How do you keep track of them all so they don't slip through the cracks?
That's a great question. So, I always say that the very best system is the one that you're going to use. So your system might look completely different from somebody else's system, even if they're in a similar position as you. You're certainly going to have a different looking system than somebody whose business is greatly different than yours. If you're a solopreneur or running a small business, it could be as simple as you said, a list that's in Google Drive, whether that's in like a long doc that you add to, or, a spreadsheet that you can sort. It could be as simple as in your phone, having a folder that's got voice memos or notes. As your team grows and as your use cases grow, it might start to look a little more sophisticated. It might be a little more, what are the stories that we tell at each part of the customer's journey? What are some really great stories to tell before somebody gets on a demo call? What's something that we should tell on a demo call? What's something that we need to tell when we're onboarding, and so on and so forth, whatever your stages look like for your customer life cycle. And you might tag those. Like maybe you have those live in your CRM and you've got them to where they're searchable by the industry the story relates to, or the size of the business, or the particular problem that it's solving. Most of the time, people will find that they already do this spontaneously and they just haven't been recording it. But the ability to capture it can amplify the magic. I'll give you an example. I went to get my blood drawn a few months ago, and you never like want to get your blood drawn. So I was going to get my blood drawn and I'd signed up for this functional health startup where they test a bazillion things. So it was a bunch of blood. It was like 15, 16 vials, like by far the most blood I've ever had drawn. So I showed up for the appointment and I have a very bad latex allergy. So I'm always very conscious of there's like no latex anywhere because I've had a couple of really bad reactions. The most recent one when I was at a dentist office when I was 16 and it was horrible. So like I always make sure that there's no latex anywhere. And as the woman was about to draw my blood, she had the tourniquet on and then she put the gloves on and the gloves were green. And I'd never seen green. I usually kind of know by the color if something has latex in it or not. And I said, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to like triple check. I know I already told you I'm allergic to latex, but I've never seen green gloves before. Are those latex free? And she said, oh yeah, everything here is latex free. And girl, if you have never seen green gloves, it means you've never been to Quest. You can't even get these green gloves if you don't work at Quest. Quest is the best. And we make these green gloves so that you know you're in great hands. And she was so proud of those green gloves that it sparked a conversation. And I said, oh wow, like you seem to really love being a phlebotomist. And she said, this is all I've ever wanted to be. And I was like, what? Because that's not a profession that you expect to hear that. And she told me a story of she was, I think she said 8 years old, and she had this crazy bacterial infection and nobody could figure out what was wrong. And she ended up being hospitalized for like 3 days. And she was so scared in the hospital, especially at night because her parents couldn't stay with her. She was probably in her 50s or 60s. So back then, I guess like they didn't let your parents stay if you were a kid. I don't even know if they do now. I assume that they do. I hope that they do. But for whatever reason, she was in these hospitals alone overnight, super scared every time she heard the noises and the beeps and the ambulances and all the sounds and people constantly interrupting her. And the second night she was there, a phlebotomist came in and said, I know we're all trying to figure out what's wrong. I'm going to take a little bit more blood. And she was, upset and scared and said, no, they've already done it. And she said, well, let me explain to you what blood is and how blood works and what's magical about our blood. And our blood can tell us so many things about our body. And she walked her through what all of the different instruments were. And she told her about the tests they were going to run. And she let her keep the tourniquet when she was done. So this one phlebotomist was so kind and instantly transformed what was this like scary, awful, traumatic experience into one that was exciting. And so she decided, little Debbie right then was like, I'm going to grow up to be a phlebotomist. In fact, she told me that she said phlebotomist until she was like 12 or 13. And her parents finally were like, okay, if you're not gonna stop it with this phlebotomist thing, you have to stop mispronouncing the word. Like we never cared to correct you because we just assumed it was a phase. But at this point, it's like not a phase. The word is phlebotomist, not phlebotomist. And from then on, all she wanted to do was be a phlebotomist.
Oh,
So she went to
wow.
college, she took all the classes that she needed to, and then she went to, I don't know what a phlebotomy school is called, but that is like the craziest origin story I have ever heard. And I ask her how often she tells people that story, and she's like, hardly ever. And I was like, why not? And she's like, I don't know. I just didn't think it was that fascinating, that relevant. Like everybody's doing this for some reason. And I was like, not everybody's doing it for a reason like that. So everybody has great stories, maybe not as, you know, direct, like point A to point B is that one. Like you may not have had this intervention in your life at age 8 that pointed you to something you would be doing 50 years later, but we all have stories. And when they're deployed at the right moment, they make people think, why would I ever want anyone other than Debbie to ever draw my blood ever again?
Oh,
Like, I
yeah.
hope I
You're
don't
going
have to
to,
get a lot more blood draws, but if I do, I know exactly where I'm going.
and you will request her by name, I'm sure.
100%.
Yes.
And I will know that I will only go to a Quest, right? Like I'm going to
Right.
go to Quest. I had been to that lab a couple of times before over the, 8 years that I've lived here for random things here or there. I could not have told you it was a Quest lab. It was just like the one that you get an email and it's like, go, show up at this time to get your blood drawn.
That's incredible.
Stories change everything.
It really does. But there's another thing in the book that you talk about a lot that really, really impacted me, and that is exceed expectations, which is the E in the supermodel. So let's talk about, I think the best example in the book is the doggy story, the company that takes care of your dog. So tell
Yeah.
us that story.
Yeah. So E is all about exceeding expectations and what I like to call intentional experience design. And in this part of the book, I really talk about the fact that every moment has the power to be impactful. And there's really only three types of experiences any of us ever have at the end of any experience you have, whether it's one to many, short, long, you're going to feel one of three ways: better, worse, or the same as you did before it started. That's it. That's it. Those are the only outcomes. And the overwhelming majority of experiences that we all have are neutral. We process the information, we move on. We get the thing, we keep going. hundreds, sometimes thousands of times a day, these little interactions happen. And so what many companies do, large and small, is they accept neutral as good. Like it's good enough. They're doing just enough not to lose that customer. And so the reason I preface the story with this is to tell you that there are little touch points everywhere. Every text message, every email, every phone call, every bill that you send, every button on your website, every interaction is an opportunity to do just enough or to exceed someone's expectations, to leave them a little better than you found them. And in the story, or excuse me, in the book, I tell the story about a company called Chewy, which I had never heard of until we adopted these dogs and we needed a prescription dog food for one of them because he was just throwing up all the time. There was like no dog food that this dog could keep down. It was very ironic because he could eat grass and he could eat rocks. And those were the two things. And we were like, please stop eating rocks. Like we were so afraid he was going to have surgery because he would just eat rocks, which apparently is pretty common when dogs have like GI issues and they can't find a food that works. So anyway, we're back and forth to the vet. We finally get a prescription for a dog food. I did not know that was a thing. I went online trying to figure out where I was going to buy this prescription dog food. I found it at a website called chewy.com. So I placed an order and I had to send a copy of the prescription. There was a button that said, before we fulfill this, we've got to get a copy of your prescription. So I just sent a really quick email and said, hey, here's this prescription for the order. Thanks. I got an email back almost instantly. And in that email, she thanked me for sending the prescription for Bear, my dog. I hadn't mentioned his name. She had looked at the prescription and replied using Bear's name. And I thought that was such a great touch point because I wasn't buying food for any dog. I was buying dog food for my dog, the most important dog on the planet. Just like customers aren't looking for solutions for any problem, they're looking for solutions for their problems, the problems that matter more than any others. So when you can show them that you care as much about their very important, very specific needs as they do, it's going to mean so much. So in that email, she did a lot of great things. I actually have a copy of the email in the book. She talks about what's going to happen next. She throws in a couple of dog puns. She says, chow, chow for now. If you need anything, give us a bark. So I replied. I didn't really need to reply to the message, but I did just because it felt rude not to, because it was such a personal note. And when I replied, it was literally just, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And so does Bear, thinking that would be the end of it. But she wrote back again and doubled down on how happy they were to have Bear as one of their VIPs, very important paws, how happy they were that I was in the Chewy family, how they would be here to help me with anything I needed. And said, we're always here to lend a helping ear. We're always here to lend a paw or ear help. I don't know. It was like really cute what she
All the
said.
dog references.
Like
Yes.
every dog reference. Yeah. Like if you need anything, give us a bark. She signed it over and snout. So it was very, very cute, very on brand. And it doesn't get a lot more commodity than dog food. Like this is the product that is available lots of places for very similar, if not identical prices, the exact same bag of food. And now, before I have even received that dog food, before I even know if it's going to work for my dog, I'm already thinking, I don't want to buy dog food anywhere else. Like, why would I go anywhere else when I could get it from this place that cares the most, that wants to help my dog? And over the next few weeks, I started shifting everything to Chewy. So treats, toys, heartworm medicine, flea and tick, like all the stuff that you need, and doing it on auto replenishment. So it just shows up. And now years later, it still just shows up. And it's so easy. They make it so easy to be a customer, but they also provide amazing support. So I think I put the story in the book. One time right after my oldest son was born, I'd put the like goopy flea and tick junk on the dogs. And I'd either forgotten to put them in their crates or they got out of their crates somehow. And I came back downstairs an hour later and one of them was licking it off the other one. And I was just horrified. I was like, oh my gosh, I've killed the dogs. And I was bawling. It was like midnight. My husband was like, is there a pet poison control. And I was like, I don't know, I'm going to just call Chewy. And so I called Chewy, and after, reassuring me I'm not like a terrible pet parent, the woman looked up the ingredients and she was like, you know what, I think you're fine. Like, I think you're okay. They're not gonna, die from licking this off each other, even if they licked a bunch of it off. But did you know that you could just give your dogs a pill for flea and tick protection? And I was like, obviously not, or I would not be putting this like crazy goop on them. And she was like, okay, well, that's also prescription, but why don't I call your vet? I see that they're up to date on all their stuff. I'll just call your vet and get the prescription, and then I'll send it to your house. And I was like, thank you. That would be amazing. So she refunded. I just ordered, I don't know, 6 months worth or whatever it was for both the dogs with the flea and tick. She totally refunded that to my credit card. She said, take the 5 months you have left over, just donate it to a shelter. Like, they'll be happy to get it. They'll, their dogs will stay in kennels. It's fine. And I'll get this sent to your house. And I was like, that's amazing. And another time I looked outside, saw a small package, assumed it was, heartworm medicine or something. And it was hand painted portraits, one of Bandit and one of Bear, with the note from Chewy thanking me for being a customer. And I have told that story hundreds of times on hundreds of stages to tens of thousands of people. I have had probably 100 people come up over the past few years and say, Chewy sent me flowers when a pet passed away. Chewy sent me a welcome box with toys when I got a new puppy. Chewy helped us out by overnighting food to us after a hurricane, after whatever natural disaster, like just so many stories. And the really cool part of that is I believe Chewy truly cares. I believe Chewy truly cares individually about every single pet parent, every single pet that they help. But even if you want to be cynical and say they don't care, it's totally a long game, they just know if they spend a little bit of money, then you're going to, be likely to tell people and you're going to keep coming back. Doesn't matter. It's the same ending. Whether you believe that they're doing it out of an altruistic nature or because of some sort of like capitalist greed, like, secret evil plot, the result is the same. Customers who love the brand, who are incredibly loyal, and who tell everyone they know, you have to get your pet stuff from Chewy because they're the ones who care the most.
This is the story that just got all my wheels turning because I'm really big on application. I love reading such an informative book that really changes the way I think, like yours has. But I also really like pausing after I read a story like that and thinking, okay, how can I make this apply to my business or to my client's business or to that business? Now, you do a fantastic job, and I'm talking up your book right now. You do a fantastic job of actually creating use cases at the end of the book. Okay, you've got the stories, you know how to create the experience. Here's how you can apply it. But I've got a little hot seat question, if you don't mind. And that is, okay, you talk about fandom taking you from a commodity to a market of one. And I get that. That's incredible. I love the idea of that. But, and it applies to a lot of my clients because they're always looking for ways to improve acquisition and retention, and better customer experience like Chewy's can be the differentiator. But a lot of the companies I work with have a below the funnel. They have a customer experience thing going on. But what about, all right, let's talk about other companies that maybe don't have a below the funnel. Maybe there isn't a lot of customer support that's going on. Maybe they're just selling something, or maybe they are a commodity, like they're a designer or a writer or something like that. How do they create such a memorable customer experience that people are raving?
Oh, I love this question. Well, thank you for all the kind words. I would say the first thing is, if you're really getting honest with yourself, you're probably not a commodity. You're probably not. even as a writer, even as a designer, you have a uniqueness, you have a perspective, a point of view that nobody else has, which makes you a better fit than anybody else on the planet for the right types of customers. So going back to starting with your story, understanding your particular uniqueness, that's where you have to start. You've got to start with your story. We didn't go all the way through super, but it's understand your customer story, personalize, exceed expectations, and repeat. The next thing I would say when I get into exceed expectations and repeat, it's looking at all of those moments. So let's say if you're in a field that operates very much like a commodity business, you're probably missing out on a lot of clients that you never knew about because they chose someone else or they excluded you from their consideration set long before they gave you their information. So asking yourself what all of the touch points in their journey before they get to you are, what the research is that they're doing, whether that's online, whether they're asking people questions, whether that's maybe they're hitting your website and then they're leaving before they actually convert in any meaningful way, and then you're spending tons of money on retargeting ads. Ask yourself how you can improve every single aspect, how you can take those negatives and turn them into neutrals or positives, and more importantly, how you can take those neutrals and turn them into positives, because I guarantee you there are so many. And it might be with the language that you use, it might be with the offers that you're making, but there are absolutely ways to differentiate yourself and make someone understand that you're a little bit different and a little bit better for what they're looking for than any of your competitors.
That is so helpful. Thank you. And I know we just touched on the supermodel. Do you want to go back and fill in the gaps in any of for any of the elements of the supermodel?
Sure, we absolutely can. So you
Okay.
is all about understanding your customer story.
Mhm.
That's really about actively listening, really getting a sense for what your customer is struggling with, what transformation they're looking for, so that you can show up not just with authority, but with empathy. Because when you pair that empathy and authority, and particularly when you have the empathy come before the authority, that's where you make a huge impact.
And it
One of my
sounds
favorite.
like this is where my hot seat question, this is where you're saying the answer can be found.
Absolutely. It's actively listening to your customers, finding out. I mean, if you feel like you don't know why someone picks you and other times doesn't, you've got to ask. You've got to ask your customers, and doing interviews with your customers. And I include some scripts in the book and some prompts. There are also a ton of free resources that I offer for free when people buy the book. And we're always adding new PDFs and resources and quizzes and scripts and things like that into those resources. But you will be amazed at what you learn from your customers when you begin to interview them, when you begin to ask them, what is it that you really like about working with us? What problem was the most important problem that we solved? A question that I love to ask your customers, and it takes a little bit of bravery, but when you ask them, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about working with me, what would you change and why? And sometimes the answers will sting a little bit. Like sometimes you're going to get feedback on things that you know you need to change, but it's worth it because the gems that you get that help you transform the way you serve your customers and think about what your business is are just things that it would have taken you like years to get to on your own. The other really good thing that I recommend everybody do, and this hits at every area of the supermodel, is to use AI. Like there is no excuse to not be using ChatGPT right now. The free version of ChatGPT is better than what most people have had access to for like 99.999% of history. To be able to have something that you can go to and ask any question and get a pretty darn good, pretty darn close answer instantly for free is such a huge advantage. To be able to understand not just the market that you want to operate in, but to how to do things better. Like one of my favorite things now is to put things I write into ChatGPT and say, this is for the purpose of X, designed for Y customer. What do I need to do to make it better? And whether it's a social post, a newsletter, a blog post, like I cannot wait to write my next book, having ChatGPT to ask, how do I make things better? Or what's something that I need to draw, a parallel between or connect different ideas. So that is an incredibly valuable tool that everybody should be using right now.
That's an incredible use case for ChatGPT. And especially this, how can I make this better? A lot of times actually said, okay, you are an expert in this, or you own a company in this, and then you can interview them. And so it's not a perfect substitute for your customers, but it's a pretty good proxy if needed.
It's a great proxy, and it gets better the more you train it. So
Mhm.
that's one of the things that is one of the most compelling reasons to play around with, experiment with all of the different AI technology that's available, but particularly ChatGPT, because it is so commonly used now. One is so that you don't fall behind your peers, and two is because the more you train it to you, the better that individual GPT gets to you. So it's going to get better and better at capturing your voice. I mean, I have one that I use that I've named it Brittany GPT, that I've loaded in my book, lots of blog posts, lots of newsletters, hundreds of transcripts of speeches and articles. And so it, thinks is the wrong word, but that's what it feels like when you interact with it as a human. It feels like it knows how to think like me and write like me. And it's good enough to where every now and then I'll post it and I'll forget I didn't write it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it fools my assistant,
Very,
it fools my
very good.
mom, it fools my husband. Like, it's scary how good. I mean, it's like, I know people call it co-intelligence, and it really is what it feels like. So using ChatGPT and other AI technology to, as you said, act as a proxy to give you information about current customers, future customers. I don't know who I want to serve, but I want to do something. Hey, ChatGPT, who would this be great for? Like, there is very little it can't do.
That's incredible. All right, now the next piece of your model is personalize. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so in the P pillar, I talk about really two different types of personalization. There's the high tech, which is automation systems, using things like scripts and CRMs to ensure that when somebody sees something, there's personally identifiable information for them. Doesn't say dear neighbor, it's got your customer's name on it. So that's like the high tech personalization. And then there's the high touch personalization, the sending of personal gifts, making personal recommendations, taking the time to actually comment thoughtfully on individuals. But the mistake that some people make is they go all in on one or the other. And in reality, it's like a 1 + 1 = 5 situation, because when you can combine high tech with high touch, that's when you truly create high impact. So getting intentional about when and how you're going to use personalization that falls into both of those camps to truly create the biggest impact over the life of a customer's journey.
Very interesting. Now, do you feel like we talked enough about exceeding expectations, or do we need more on
I
that?
think we do. I think we talked a lot about it. I would really say that the thing that most people probably have the largest opportunity to improve when it comes to exceeding expectations is we tend to spend a disproportionate amount of time on what I would call like the during phase. What can you do before and after? And what are the moments that you can say, I know I'm going to nail this every time? Like, I love my dentist. They do everything great. It's, shout out to Dr. Wells at Nashville Aesthetic Dentistry. His entire team is amazing. One of the really cool things about visiting there is I know they are always going to offer me a smoothie on the way out. They have a smoothie bar. And before I leave, they're going to say, all right, do you want strawberry? Do you want strawberry banana? Do you want chocolate? What do you want? And they're going to send me out the door with a smoothie. They have other options too. There's like fancy coffees. I'm not really a coffee drinker, but like they nail it. So you're always leaving with, I mean, it's kind of brilliant because you're leaving with something that's probably like acidic on your teeth that's gonna, bring
Yeah,
you
true.
but like they nail it as that last moment. So bringing intentionality to what all of the moments are before, during, and after a customer's experience.
I love that. And again, that answers my hot seat question all the more in depth, which I appreciate. And then your final pillar in the supermodel is repeat.
Is repeat. That's right. And Elizabeth Arden said almost 100 years ago, repetition makes reputation, and reputation makes customers. And it's so true. So in this part of the book, I talk about all of the things that you can do to make it simpler to do the super thing, right? Like, how do you make the super things as easy as the other things? Like, how do you make it almost default that your team is going to operate at this new level that you want them to? And whether that's through something as simple as a checklist, or whether that's through creating more in-depth automations and programs, but you've got to have that repeatability, scalability, because that's how you build your brand. And I think, all probably been in a situation where we go out to a restaurant and it's amazing, and then we go back and order the same thing and it's not amazing. And then there's that cognitive dissonance that sets in of which one of those is the exception and which one is the rule. And maybe you go back, but there's a good chance you probably don't, because
Yes.
it's as simple to go to another place as it is to do the mental gymnastics of like, what changed? What was this? Blah, 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 to like give them a third try.
And I think when I see the word repeat, what really comes to mind is this is not a once and done thing. This has to become the culture of your organization.
Absolutely. It is a day in, day out obsession with not doing just the bare minimum, not just closing that sale, but creating a super fan, creating an opportunity to where someone can't wait to come back and buy from you again and can't wait to tell their friend. I saw an interesting statistic the other day. There's a company called Mention Me, and they're an advocacy marketing platform. And so they study referrals and repeat business and reviews and all of the things around advocacy marketing. And what they have found is that customers who come in via a referral are 5 times more likely to refer your brand to someone else than to someone who comes in through any other channel. So they saw an ad, they landed on you from Google, whatever. Someone who comes via a referral is 5 times as likely to refer someone else to your business.
Wow.
Is an incredible statistic. And that tells you it's not even just about creating that first generation super fan. Like, that's amazing. But where the real value comes in terms of ROI and lifetime value is in their network, and then the networks of that person, and the networks of that person. And it just goes, it's like a ripple in a pond.
And that is virality. So back to
Absolutely.
where you started, you are creating fans who then create fans. I love this. So this book really was transformative for me, for the way I think about my business, and for the way I will advise my clients. So tell us a little bit, what inspired the book? What made you finally decide to pick up the keyboard and say, okay, I'm going to do this thing?
Well, thank you for asking. I always wanted to write a book. I love books. I always wanted to be an author. And I just felt like I didn't want to do it until I knew I could do it right. And I spent years trying to figure out how to write this book. And I love business books. I've read hundreds and hundreds of business books, but I didn't want to write a business book that felt like another business book. I wanted it to feel like a conversation with a friend, but I wanted to do it in a way to where people weren't, and this sounds bad to say, but like, I was very fearful that if I wrote a fun business book, people would be dismissive of it. They would be like, oh, it's another female author trying to make like you know what I mean? Like, I had
Yes, I
all of
know what
this
you
fear
mean.
of,
Yeah.
like, I didn't want people to be like, oh, she's like a female entrepreneur writing a book for female entrepreneurs. I wanted to write a book that was for everybody. And I knew that I already had one strike against me because I was a female. I had another strike against me because I was young. And the fact that I was saying, I think I can make a book that's fun, but not just for young females, but for everybody of all ages, of any gender, whatever they're doing, that they just enjoy reading. So I wanted to make an accessible business book. And it took me a really long time to figure out how to do that. And there are some things, some decisions that I made throughout the book of making all the H1s and the chapter titles be song titles, and using color and using humor and trying to do things that would make it feel really fun, but not in a way that was distracting to the point that I was trying to make, but in a way that really illustrated the point I was trying to make. So that was a really fine line that I tried to walk that, to be honest, took a really long time. Like, I spent 3 years writing this book.
I honestly believe you nailed it. Hearing what your intention was, you did such a good job, because I'm going to hold this up to the camera. This is the inside of the book. And anytime there's a quotable quote, that's something she wants you to remember, she creates a full page banner for that quote. And this is so perfectly branded. I'm looking behind you at the stars And look at the stars on here and on the cover. The colors, it's clearly your brand colors. And then it has this feel, you tie into become a star, have fans, but also the ticket, like going to an event, which was so special. These are such subtle things that most authors don't think about, and I'm really impressed that you thought about it.
Well, thank you. I was so fortunate to find a publisher that believed in my vision and came alongside me. I worked with a company called Page Two out of Canada. And when I had my initial meeting with them and several other publishers that I was considering working with, I had a file with probably 30 reference images in it of things that I had been collecting over years that I was like, I love this use of color. I love this use of graphics. I love this style. I love the juxtaposition between big and small here. I was very intentional, not just about the book being printed in color, but it's 6x8 instead of 6x9 because I felt like that was a more friendly size. The margins are about 2/10 of an inch bigger all the way around because I have ADHD and sometimes I mostly read books on Kindle now because sometimes it's like too much when it doesn't look beautiful, right? I'm like, it's just the spacing should be better. There should be more margin. It's just hard to focus. And so I wanted to create a book that almost dared you to not read it. Like I also know a lot of people will buy books but not read them. And I wanted to create a book that people wanted to start, that they wanted to finish, and that they found tremendous value throughout. So thank you for saying that. We worked very long and very hard to try to capture some of
Oh,
those
it is.
things on the
I
page.
mean, this is a book that really does touch you on a lot of different levels because, of course, you've got the intellectual, the teaching, which is first rate. You have no reason to worry about that coming from a woman, but also just the physical experience, as you say. And I love that you took the time to actually think about that. Um, not many books feel like this book. And I love the way you just said it. It feels more friendly. So you were even applying super to the creation of your book.
I did. I wanted people, and I questioned whether or not I should have something at the end of the book that kind of said, like, see what I've done here. And I didn't because I wanted people to have that aha moment. But all of the principles that I talk about of how you can make something feel the same or different, I used them throughout the book because I wanted people to say, huh, this book doesn't feel like other business books that I've read. So thank you for picking up on that too. That
You're
was,
welcome.
again, I wanted to show that I am practicing what I'm preaching and that it doesn't have to be like a lot of times people will say, I spoke a couple of weeks ago to several hundred car wash owners and operators. And I actually told the Chewy story on stage. And as I was talking, a gentleman raised his hand and I was like, oh, do you have a question? Like, can I help you? And he was like, yeah, like how much are you spending there? Like my people who are members of my car wash are only paying $20 a month. Like I can't spend a lot of money on them. And I said, I'm so glad you asked that question. How many people come through your automatic car wash every month with children in the back seat? And he was like, a bunch. And I was like, how many times have you ever on their way out had the person standing there with the towel hold up a Hot Wheels car to get mom or dad to roll down the window to give to the kid to say, mom and dad are doing a great job. They're keeping their car clean. Here's a car for you to keep clean too. And he's like, I've never done that. And I was like, all right, well, a Hot Wheels car costs about 80 cents if you buy them in bulk. Are your customers worth 80 cents? Is it worth 80 cents to you to have that family renew for another month or 6 more months? And of course he said yes. And then I went on to give a few more examples that, you could do with whether it was the air freshener that's hanging on the inside or little towels or all of the other things. Which is to, of course, say that it's not about the money that you spend. Yes, sometimes there are costs associated, but the best marketing doesn't cost anything. Sending a good email doesn't cost any more than sending a bad email. Sending an intentional text doesn't cost any more than sending a thoughtless text. It's about the intentionality, the creativity, and, really the effort more so than it's about the dollars, which is great news for people who don't have big budgets but want to be able to run with the big boys.
I love this. You have just been such a joy to talk with. Tell our audience where they can get your book and where they can connect with you.
Well, thank you again for everything. It's been such a lovely conversation. You can connect with me at brittanyhodak.com, and you can find Creating Superfans everywhere books are sold. There is an Audible version or audiobook version that's available on all the major audiobook platforms that I narrate, and it's available as an ebook and, as you mentioned, in the hardcover that is available everywhere books are sold.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.